Jamie, I'm going to pass it straight over to you, as I love to do to Ben normally. What did you make of the Europa League final in 5 words or less?
What a poor show. What an absolute. I don't care about your
Yeah. 5 words.
5 words.
No, no,
What an
that's the five. That's
abysmal
four.
showing.
It was terrible, wasn't it? It
It,
was. I'm
it was
glad
one of the
Tottenham won.
worst finals I've seen.
Yeah, and I actually had a lot of hope for it. I thought because they both had a poor season, they both have a lot to prove. But I think it went the other way of both had a poor season because they both lack so much quality that they don't have anything to show for in these big games.
Yeah, I mean, I had a bit of bias, obviously being a Leeds fan. I didn't want Man United to win, but they were both so poor. Have both been so poor this season that, you know, I'd have thought there's going to be no goals. It's going to go extra time. It's going to go penalties, and Man United are just going to scrape it like they always do. I mean, how did they even get into the Europe anyway from where they finished last season? They
Yeah,
won the FA Cup,
yep,
and that got them there. And it was just I thought they are going to do it. They're going to win the FA Cup, get into Europe, well Europa League, and then they're going to go through the Europa League, win the Europa League, and get into the Champions League by finishing 16th.
yeah. It would have been an absolute joke.
Thankfully, we got Spurs that one, and what a great season we've had. Newcastle win a cup.
Yep,
We've had Crystal Palace win a cup.
loved
We've
that.
had Spurs win a cup.
Yep. And Liverpool in the Premier League. So, I mean, it was perfect, really.
Mm.
No, because, like, you say that. I mean, look, I think a lot of people might have said, oh, Arsenal winning it would have been just as nice. But it wasn't Man City, I think, is the silver line that everyone looks at, because 5 in a row would have been
Yeah.
ridiculous. But going back to the Europa League final, I mean, you said, like you said, you mentioned about United. They stepped it up in the FA Cup last year. As bad as they were through the season, they did step it up in that final against City and played quite well. And throughout points in this season, I'd watch United turn up for certain games. Specifically in my mind is the Liverpool 2-2 draw. You know, that Manchester United side. If that side, which was coached by Amorim, had been anywhere near the cup final on Wednesday, they would have walked through Tottenham. Because Tottenham weren't amazing. Defensively, they had some solid moments. Kuti and Van der Ven were both incredible at the back. I have to give him credit, and Danso as well when he came on. I thought was very solid. But if Man United had turned up with that same intent that they did against Liverpool, and even when they beat City earlier in the season, 2-1, I just think they would have walked it, and I thought that's why they would have won the final. But it turned out it was Tottenham, much to the joy of I think every fan outside of London. I would say probably enjoyed that one, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point. I was going to say, I wonder if it was Liverpool or Man City to turn up in that final. Just for some reason, them being in the Europa League, if it was one of them two teams that they'd come up against, would you have seen a different Man United? Would
Probably.
would a different team turned up? Because they, like you said, they always perform when they're coming up against better teams. Now, Spurs this season have been just as poor as them.
Yeah.
So, is it that they were playing a poor team, so they just played poorly?
Yeah,
I
maybe.
think so.
I
Like,
just think they couldn't get it up for it. Excuse the rude language, maybe, but it just felt like Man U couldn't get it up for it. And as look, I actually think Tottenham could, and I think they actually did. They didn't perform great, don't get me wrong, but they were more up for it, especially on a defensive point of view. And they sort of said when they went 1-0 up at half time, they said, "Look, we'll defend with our lives, and we will win this game." And it was a very strong, I think, defensive performance. I mean, I know they didn't have much thrown at them, but whenever they did get something thrown at them, they came up with an answer, didn't they? And Tottenham, you could see it in, I think, not just in the players, but in the fans as well. It felt like that was Tottenham's final to win, and Man U were just the other team. You know, when an English side goes against any foreign side, it's their final to win, isn't it? It felt that way. You know, it was Tottenham's final, and well, they won it, which for me I was very happy about. Like you said, you being a Leeds fan, you were biased. Me being a Liverpool fan, I was biased. I will sit there and say I was the closest I've ever been probably to another team's fan on that day. I was a Spurs fan. In all essence, I was because I celebrated when they scored and I celebrated when they won.
I think it was a big game for Spurs specifically because, especially for Ange, because I know the fan base is so split. I mean, it's let's say split. It's probably about 95% of them want him to go. They want him sacked. Now, that does him winning the Europa League give him that extra bit to maybe should we keep him for another season, see what we can do? Whereas we already knew with Amarim they were going to let him build the team because that's not his team.
Yep.
So regardless of what happened in the final, that was going to be his team. He was still going to be there next season. Whereas Ange was, if he lost that, he was 100% out of the door.
Yeah.
Now, does that give him a bit more rope?
I tell you what it does for me.
Season,
I think personally, what he's done is he's bought himself 3 months. I don't think he's bought himself much of a transfer window. If you look at Spurs' side on paper, regardless of injuries, if you just had to pick a position on the Premier League just by looking at the quality of Spurs' side and nothing else, the players that they have right now, where would you put them in the Premier League? 7th? 6th?
Yeah,
around that area.
They're still a top 8 team, I'd say.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I don't know if they'll back Ange fully. Kind of how Man United didn't back. They did financially back Ten Hag, but they sort of gave him that 3 months, didn't they, into the start of the season?
Yeah.
And I think Ange might have earned himself that same privilege. And they'll go, right, let's see how you're doing in the Premier League next season. If it's the same form, you'll be gone. But if you start off strong in the Premier League and the Champions League, or average in the Champions League, decent in the Premier League, if you're in around that 8th to 5th place, let's say, keep going. But if you're anywhere near the bottom half of the table, you'll be going, and I don't think they'll give big financial backing in the transfer window for him because of that, which could harm him, because they might be thinking, well, we need to save these money for the next manager that comes in to get their players. Maybe they'll spend in January if it's a new manager, or if he's doing well by January, splash some cash in January, push on for the season, So I wouldn't say it's going to be a big transfer window for Tottenham, but I definitely think Ange has earned himself that little bit of grace period, because it is a European final. At the end of the day, one objective that was probably set out to him at the start of the season was get in the Champions League, and he's achieved it. He may have done it in a very backwards way, and it's not been acceptable, but he has achieved his goal, I think, in my opinion.
I think you're right. I mean, Europe at the beginning of the season, they just set out the targets. What do we want from the season? What do you want me to achieve this season? We want Europe. Anything else is a bonus.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't expecting a trophy, and I think Ange said it in his interview afterwards, saying about it's a massive monkey. He didn't use that terminology, but it's a massive monkey off Spurs' back, because it's that cliche of, oh, you're doing the Spursy thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't say that anymore. It's that voodoo's gone. They've won a trophy now.
Yeah, it's done. You can't talk about it anymore, can you? And I'm happy for them as well, because now that burden, I do believe that burden has now passed on to Arsenal as well. If you look at the big 6 sides, I know Arsenal only won the FA Cup a few years back. It hasn't been that long compared to Spurs and other teams. But if you look at that big 6 now, they are the longest without a trophy. And that trophy that they got most recently was only an FA Cup. And I know it was only an FA Cup, is a bit of a harsh thing to say. But Chelsea is the next one along from that. They won the Champions League. Then it's Man United more recently won the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup. Spurs have just won a European trophy. Man City have won a Premier League, and Liverpool won a Premier League, plus League Cups and so on. So, yes, Arsenal are now the longest with the drought, and they certainly need something next season. But we might get onto that in a little bit. Before we move on from the Europa League, I want to pull up a couple of other teams who have been low in the Premier League standings at the time of reaching a European final, because in my opinion, these might be the worst 2 teams to ever make it to a European final, Manchester United and Tottenham. We did once have Fulham, who were 12th in the Premier League, play against Atletico Madrid. They lost. And we also had West Ham, obviously, in the Conference League, finishing 14th in the Premier League that season, who I think are slightly closer in competition. How would you say Tottenham and Man U compare to that West Ham side? And bear in mind, that's fresh in the mind as well, only a few years ago.
I mean, you look at look how the teams played. West Ham that season, even when they were 14th, that was the 22-23 season. I think the team still played better than what I've seen from Spurs and United this season.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, Spurs have been so much better in Europe. They've played a different brand of football. He's changed his tactics for Europe, and it's worked out great for him. Man United, I mean,
It
can
worked
you
better.
call it luck, or can you call it luck, or can you just call it the Man United way of winning things?
Yeah.
You know what happened against Leon?
Yeah, but that's the
Didn't
Man United.
see
That's the
anything.
Man United way, isn't it? That's just it.
Yeah,
Old
I
Trafford
didn't
can do
see
that.
anything different from them. I didn't see anything different from what I've seen in the league. It was just the legs. They just pushed it through. Leon's legs went a bit. The heads must have dropped a little bit, and they just pushed it through. But that West Ham team, they was I think when they were in the Premier League and they were 14th at the time, they still played better football than these two
Yeah.
this season. And in Europe, when they won the Conference League, they were brilliant to watch.
Yep.
I you you seen them play? I think, but was that
It's
that was
Bowen
when they
and
had that
but
Declan
Bowen and
Rice, wasn't it?
Declan Rice, and that's
Yeah,
what I was going to bring on. Man United, if you look at them, they've got Fernandes and they had Diallo for quite a bit of the season, and they were the two driving force. And then you go and compare them to maybe to Bowen and Rice, who were the driving force behind West Ham. But it was a more complete side, wasn't it, with West Ham? And it's interesting you bring up the luck of Man United throughout the Europa League. I actually think it's Amram's style of football. He's very consistent with he's going to play his way, and he's not going to change his mind on that. Does it suit English football? In my opinion, no. Does it suit European football? Potentially, absolutely. And that's why he went through in each round of the knockout stages, and why Sporting had a very good start in Europe, dismantled Man City at one point in the season, because it's the same structure, the same tactics. They work well for European sides, I think, and in European nights it works. But when you come up against a rigid English side, and Spurs are an English side at the end of the day, it backlashed on them. But yeah, in my opinion, Manchester United are the worst ever finalists, followed by Tottenham, and then I'd rank West Ham above them in terms of teams to make it to a European final.
I think we can agree on that.
Yeah.
Another thing is, Ange could change his tactics, like you said
Yeah.
before. I'm going back to the point, but he set up the way he did, and he changed. He got the goal, and he changed. What
Yep.
did Amarim change? He conceded the goal. Didn't change his tactics. Still tried doing the same thing. Didn't change formation. Just kept trying to go down the wings. It just didn't work.
I actually think he did make a little tweak. I noticed during the game. I don't know if you noticed this as well. Diallo in the first half was Man United's best player, and he was actually out wide the entire time, right on that touchline, wasn't he? And he'd skin a Dogie or whoever went out to him and get a good chance. He obviously had that one that flashed across the goal from the corner. In the second half, he came in field quite a bit more, and I don't know if that was Amarim's plan. Push him in, have Dallo or Mazraoui overlap more on the right.
Yeah.
But it completely backfired because Diallo no longer got the space that he was getting out on that touchline. And, I mean, everyone was saying in the game, oh, look, Diallo was so good in the first half and he did nothing in the second. Well, I think he was told to go in field and it didn't work for him because he then had to face Bentancur, Basuma, Sarr, as well as a doggy at the same time, And if he got past them, Van der Ven was there as well. So I do think Amarim tried changing a little bit, keeping the same shape, of course, but I do think it backfired at the same time.
But that wasn't straight away. I think that was about 10 minutes into the game. Isn't that down to what Ange changed that forced Amarim to bring on substitutes? And when you have essentially he has two right backs behind him, does Diallo trying to maraud forward, he's gonna have to cut in naturally because he's not, like you say, he's not gonna have the space outside, so he's gonna have to cut in because that's where he's gonna find more space. But like you say, it just didn't work because it became overcrowded and he couldn't do what he was best at.
Yeah.
Hit that byline with his pace
and splash it across
knock
goal.
it across. Yeah.
Yeah, and